everyone. Welcome back to Psych with Dr. DK. I'm really excited that you're here and you're watching. Tonight, we're going to be talking about speaking things into existence. Now, before you push pause, I want you to listen to what I have to say. I think that there is a very big misconception to what speaking things into existence is. There's two really big extremes, and I want to talk about those extremes tonight. So, what it is basically there is a lot of people pushing for speaking things into existence by you being positive and saying, this is my dream, this is my desire, this is my wants. And if you don't, people will tell you, like, if you don't say it, it's not going to happen. Like, you have to speak it to the earth so the earth can respond and give you what you desire. And I think that is a very bad thing. Why? So let me explain where this comes from. So the thing about speaking things into existence, a lot of people are like, well, it's just thinking positively. And it's like, okay, that's different. But when you're saying that the universe needs to hear your positive energy so that things would happen, like good karma would come to you, you're putting too much faith in the earth itself. When the earth doesn't do things like that. The earth doesn't have human characteristics to make things happen. Now, the danger that comes into play is that when you're speaking things and solely only saying, like, if let's just use a doctorate as an example. If I were to get this doctorate and if I just speak that I'm going to be a doctor one day and that's all I'm doing is speaking it into existence, you're never going to get the doctorate done. You're just going to be hoping it happens versus doing the work to get there. Now, when you're looking at a positive mindset where you're like, okay, this really sucks, but one day, like if I keep going down this road and keep doing the hard work, it could happen. Now, speaking it into existence, I've heard from a lot of Christian environments. And I think that the problem is we try to say, like, oh, well, it's our own thoughts that can keep this from happening. And it's our own emotions that keep it from happening. And if we are not positive, it's just not going to happen. And there's a danger in that because there's a lot of Bible verses that people will start pulling up and being like, this Bible verse applies to this and that Bible verse applies to that. And you're taking the Bible verses out of context. And that's dangerous because that's not what the Bible verse was talking about. It wasn't saying, hey, if you wish for $1 million, all you got to think about is $1 million being in your bank account. And the danger is that so many people gravitate toward this speaking into existence because it's really giving your self-control. And in a way, like you feel like you're in control of your life. And so, there's these speakers going out there and they're really engaging and like you get trapped in what they're saying. And they're just like, well, if you just gave $100 to this organization, God is going to bless you with $1,000 over here. And like, you just have to believe that God is going to allow that to happen to you. And then, there's other places where it's like, if you just believe in your inner self and you just believe so hard that your inner self is going to manifest that out into your atmosphere, like you would have that $1,000 or $1 million in your bank account. And then there's these people who we buy into this because it feels like, okay, I have this control. I can do this. If I just believe I'm not sick anymore, if I just believe I don't have anxiety anymore, if I just believe I don't have depression anymore, if I just believe I'm not being abused by so-and-so anymore, or I just believe that I have this degree, it'll just happen and I don't have to work for it. And I think that that's a very dangerous mentality to be in. I think there is nothing wrong with being positive. I am trying to be a positive person. And I am a firm believer that if we plan something and we stick to a plan and we do that plan and we think positive, good things can come from that. But what it doesn't it doesn't get rid of the hard things that we have to go through to get there. So, one of the things that I've always heard is people have said, like, if you just believe, like if you're going in an interview, right? Let's talk about that because that's a common where I hear this. And they're like, well, if you just think really positively, you'll get the job. And they're like, if you think any negative thoughts, you're going to lose the chance at the interview. And I asked someone, I was like, can you explain this to me? Because I'm really confused why you think that if I just believe, as if I'm believing in pixie dust and a fairy, it's just going to happen. And this individual told me, she's just like, well, for me, if I start to think negatively, like, I'm not going to get the job, when I'm focused on that, I actually discourage myself from doing well. And I was like, okay, so that's not really speaking it into existence though. And she's like, well, no, but that's just, if I were to speak it into existence, I'm going to be more positive. And I'm like, no, you're just hyping yourself up. Like, that's totally different. Speaking something into existence really is you saying, I don't have to do anything to get there. If I just believe it and I think about it really hard, it's going to happen. So in our head, it's that if I have Y and then I have X, I have a combination of Z. That's going to happen like that. And it's like, nope, that doesn't happen. Now, yeah, for some people, they're like, oh, I just believed it. And this is where the danger comes in, is that a lot of people who have maybe a health issue, and or maybe they're trying to get pregnant, or maybe they're trying to get out of poverty, or maybe they're trying to get out of a very bad relationship. They sit back and they're like, why is this not happening? And I keep believing it, and I keep doing all of the things to have this thing happen, and nothing's happening. And then they're discouraged, and then it hits them emotionally. So now their anxiety or depression or self-esteem is hit, and they're just like, the earth just doesn't have anything for me. And then they feel like they don't have purpose. And this is where I have a hard time putting trust in the earth. And I want to put my hope and trust in God. And like, that is where I think sometimes we misplace where our hope and our trust should be. And we put that hope and trust in our thought process. If we just believe it, we stop working for the things that we need to do. Now, when I think about thinking positively, I think thinking positively is really good. And I remember this was years ago, and I had a friend who was a little bit of a negative Nancy. If something happened, like, okay, the shoes were 2 different colors by accident. Oh my God, my whole day is going to be messed up. And if I'm wearing 2 different shoes by accident, the whole world is going to get against me and everything bad's going to happen. And so she was looking for every single bad thing that was happening that day. Oh, I dropped coffee on my pants. Oh, I left my phone at work. Oh, I stubbed my finger. Oh, I almost got into a car accident. And some of those things are major, where it's like, oh my gosh, then you would get this call about someone being hurt or whatever. And then you're just in this negative mindset all day long. But it was so many good things happened through that day of this friend, and she never recognized it. Where I'm like, oh, but you got a raise at work. Like, you got an A on your paper. And she's like, well, my paper was late. And I was like, but you got an A on it, even though it was late. You got a raise at work, even though you had a really bad day at work. Like, these are positives. And what happens when we focus so much on the negative is we just become a negative Nancy. So to me, the bad side is thinking everything is the earth's responsibility to give it to you if you just align yourself to the earth. And that's where I think some people go to the extreme with the seeing and is believing. But then there's people who are like, well, if I just think positively, it'll happen and I don't have to work for it. And then you have the people who are like, it doesn't matter what my thought process is, I'm just screwed. And so I think that we have to be very careful to understand that just because you think it doesn't mean it's gonna happen. Like, let's be real. Let's think of some of the stuff that we're like, oh, I'm in a tough job and I'm thinking about this place I can go work. And if I just believe it hard enough, I'm going to get it. And you did believe and then you didn't get it. That doesn't mean that you should stop thinking positive thoughts. But it also doesn't mean that the earth has the ability to give us what we want, because the earth is not God. Like, I'm going to just call it out. Like, we put our trust and hope in the wrong things. So when we are thinking negatively, it can actually negatively impact our lives. And when we think positively, it might not even do anything except for keep us in emotionally in a emotional position to not just be beating up on ourselves the whole time. And I think it comes back to this sense of purpose. When we are trying to make things happen in our life, we are hoping for purpose. And we are scared that if this thing doesn't happen, we don't have a purpose in our life. And really, when we're in bad situations, we don't want to sit back and be like, yeah, this is just good for me. This is just going to grow me. This is just going to help me in the long run. And you shouldn't have to be forced to think like that. You can say, hey, this situation sucks. But I think what happens is we try to push off what we're feeling so much that we're like, if we just believed, it would just happen. And, it would be great. Like, I would have loved to be like, $1 million is going to come in my bank account tomorrow. $1 million is going to come into my bank account tomorrow. And it happened. That would have been so cool. Like, I would have freaking loved that. But what was better for me than just getting that $1 million? I mean, it would have been really good. Let's be real. Like, I've been set up for life. Let's pause on that. Like, for sure. So it sounds appealing to me, but what I've realized is that when I'm just like, if I just think it, I don't have to do it. And that's why I think sometimes we get attracted to these things, is if I just believe really, 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 really hard, these things would happen and I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to be gifted this thing. And so what tends to happen is a couple of things from a stance of moving in our lives, we might just believe it so much that hopefully it happens and we don't have to work for it. And I've seen this a little bit of in education. So when we think so hard that it's just going to happen and manifest for ourselves, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I need to think that this degree is going to happen automatically for me. I don't have to do anything. Like the gods are just going to take care of me and it's just going to happen. And, then, as someone who works with students, I'm like, oh, how's that paper coming? And they're just like, I haven't touched it in months, but don't worry. One day I'm going to get that degree. And I'm like, you got to move. Like, you got to move forward. Like, you have to think positive. But there's this push off when we think of like the universe is going to get our back. We push off our responsibility to do what we got to do. So there's needing to be this shift in our thinking. Yes, it is so great to just not have to do anything and just believe that it's going to happen. Like, $1,000 pops into my hand right now. There's nothing there. Like, I'm not trying to mock anybody who really believes in positive thinking, because positive thinking and speaking things into existence are two different things. But I have seen time and time and time again where people have been super negative and they have gone for that job interview, or they've gone to a date, or they've gone to a school presentation and they bombed them all. Like, it was just horrible because they were just so negative. And it was like, oh, this date's going to go horrible. I'm going to screw up in class and it's going to be the end of the world. And I'm just not going to think positive. And, they get to these things and the person on the receiving end is just like, what are you doing? Like, you are so different right now than what was happening the other day because you're so negative. And that's a danger. There's two extremes. And so there's also this middle, and I love the middle. The middle is pretty cool, but it is a really hard place to be, because being in the middle means that you can say, you know what? I'm going to plan for this, but I'm also going to realize it's going to be really hard. So if I plan for it, if I plan in the things that I'm looking at doing and then working hard to get there, it's going to happen. It might not be in the time frame we want it to be, and it might not look exactly the way we thought it was going to be, but it's going to happen. And there's this saying out there that says, we don't plan to fail, we just fail to plan. And so when we're doing this, speaking it into existence and our negative mindset, we're sitting in the middle with just no plan. Like, we're not even trying. And we're not moving forward. And so we might wake up 5 years from now and be like, I've been trying to think positive this entire time and like nothing has come of that. And then we lose hope and we feel like we lose purpose. So if we were to look at a situation and we were to say, you know what, a lot of life is going to happen in this period of time, but I'm going to plan out, like, I want to do my bachelor's, I want to do my master's, I want to do my PhD, or like, I want to own my own business. What are the first couple steps that you can take in the next year? Apply for a business license, apply for a company name, establish a bank account. But if you're just going to sit there and be like, in a year, I really, 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 really believe I'm going to have a business, and you do nothing for a year, guess what? In a year, you're not going to have a business. If you could see, if you're just listening online right now, my face is just like, oh my God, like, you mean that I have to work? And I'm like, yes, you have to get up and you have to move. And I think when we're speaking things so much into existence, we lose We lose this ability to realize we have more control than just a thought and emotion. And that's where positive thinking can come in, is like, okay, I have a plan and this plan is going to get screwed up. God does not laugh at our plan. A lot of people say that, like, oh, people say, tell the Lord your plan and the Lord's going to laugh at you. No, but if it's not aligned to what he has you, where he wants you to go, he's going to close the doors. He's not going to laugh at you. But if you're a Christian and you're praying, God, align my heart to yours, you're going to see where he was taking you, and he's going to take you where he wants you to go. And so there's this ability that we have to be more positive about where we're at. And if you have ever gone on a mission trip or a trip to like Africa or Mexico, you will see so many people who are so thankful for life, and they don't have all of these things. Like they're thankful for little things, and they have this joy that is unexplainable. Like you really sit back and you're like, man, I don't have to have all this stuff to be happy. And I think that that's where we get lost, is that we're like, if we just had this, we would be happy. And it's the mentality of, I'll be happy when XYZ happens, but I'm not going to be happy until then. And I think that's where the speaking in existence and negativity comes in, where it's just like, we have no purpose. We have no just desire to go anywhere. But if we're able to say, you know what, I want to go in this direction. I don't want to stay where I'm at in 5 years from now. You can say, okay, I'm going to use positive thinking to motivate me when things are hard. And sometimes it's like, okay, if I do the things that I need to do, if I follow the plan, I will finish the degree, and then I could apply for jobs, and then I can plan to buy a house. If I save the money, I can buy a house. And that's not speaking it into existence. It's doing the steps that it takes to get there. And I really think that when we try to manifest emotion, or we just say, if we just believe that it wasn't there, like I've heard people do this with anxiety, depression, cancer, and other disorders, where they're like, if we just pretend it doesn't exist, it's going to just go away. And it's like, no, you have to work on it. You have to work. Like, what's causing your anxiety? Let's figure it out. Let's move through that so that we're not having those anxiety moments. Do you need medication? What is medication's purpose? To help. I have anxiety, and it can cause, it can be really high for a couple days and then cause deep depression moments because my body's finally dropping. And I used to, and struggle, I still struggle with this. So I'm going to be honest. I still struggle with this because I sit there and be like, oh, if I just think positive, it won't happen. If I just believe I don't have anxiety, it just won't happen. And it's like, hey, D, like, why don't you sit back for a minute and think through what might be causing your anxiety, and realize that therapy and medication is a benefit, because my body has learned with anxiety to, like, when I get excited, like excited, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Disneyland, I immediately go into panic because my body has conflated good emotions with it is all anxiety because it has been on high for so long. And so if I'm able to help my body relearn what it is to panic and what it is to have a good emotion, it's not going to go into a panic mode every single time. And if I don't take the time to stop saying, well, just think positive, like just speak it into existence, I don't have anxiety, and like try to push it under the rug, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to deal with this right now. Instead, I'm going to start to see my anxiety is going to go down. Like, that's amazing. And that's not just thinking positive, that's working through the crap to make sure that I have the ability to step forward. And I've noticed that my anxiety has gone down and my depression has gone away because I'm working on it. I was able to get degrees done because I worked on it. Did that mean it was perfect? No, it was really hard. Like, it was extremely hard to get through degrees. It took me 8 years to get through my bachelor's, which most people are like, oh, that's kind of consistent with the national average. It's like, yeah, it just took a really long time when everyone else is like, oh, I did it in 4 or 5 years. I'm like, I did this in 8 years. But I did my master's in a year, which meant I took 2 classes at the same time. And then I did my PhD in 3.5 years. And the difficulty is that's typically 5 to 7 years, but I did it in 3.5 years. And some people have been like, oh, did you manifest it? Did you just speak it into an existence? And I'm like, no, I worked my tail off. Like, I was working, like, rewriting One week I spent 65 hours on it. The next week I'd spend 40 hours on it. And sometimes I'd be like, okay, I've spent 10 hours a week on my stuff to get done. And I worked really hard to get there. And so when you're working really hard to get there, and then you add the component of positiveness on that and positivity, you're combining those two things together to help you feel joy during the hardship. And that's where I think when we lose our hope, when we lose our understanding of our purpose, when we lose the ability to control things, we try to control it in different ways that could be very bad for us. That creates us pushing things under the rug, not moving on things that are our goals. And then we don't plan to fail, but we end up just missing out on things that we would have been successful in it if we put hard work in there. And I think that's the danger of some people. They gravitate toward this because they're like, I just need a purpose and I need to know my life is not always going to be crap. And if I could just be positive, I could do better in life. And it's like, absolutely, if you did that. But you can't ask the universe to give you $1 million and have it pop up in your hand and then be upset when it doesn't happen. And then to take that anger and then to be like, well, screw the hard work on my degree, or screw the hard work of working hard at my job, or screw like doing things because it's just stupid because this one thing didn't happen because I didn't think that, it wouldn't happen if I just spoke it into existence. So I don't know. That's what I wanted to talk about tonight. I think, again, there is nothing wrong with thinking positive. Just want to wrap that up. There is nothing wrong with thinking positive. I don't think we need to stuff things under the rug when things hurt. It is okay to say I have anxiety. It is okay to have medication. It's a good thing. It would be the same thing as if you get a migraine and like you get, if you've ever had migraines or sinus infections or like a cough and you went and got medication. It's the same thing that you're doing with your anxiety, is that you're able to find a medication that works to help your body say, let's relearn how we're reacting. Because that's a brain thing, not a heart thing. Like, yes, our heart is hurt, so our body reacts because of that. But if we're able to help our body calm down a little bit, we're doing our body justice. But if we don't look at some of our things going on and we just keep putting like, we're just going to be positive, you're going to end up really miserable in your life. And I have a story. It's a very short story and it's a very sad story where, I know a student who was working on her doctoral degree, and she was so overwhelmed, and she's like, I keep thinking about this and I just keep speaking it into an existence, and I'm hitting every single roadblock ahead of me. And she said these words that I was like, don't you dare do this. She goes, well, what I could do is just drop out and just call myself a doctor. And I was like, no, you can't. Like, that's not good. Don't do that. And the reality is there have been people who have done that, where they don't finish their road of getting things done. And then they just lie because they're just so embarrassed to have felt like they have failed. And if you don't know, the doctoral journey is very rigorous. It is very hard. It is very long. And there are so many roadblocks. Some people can get done faster than others. And it doesn't mean the person who gets done and takes longer is stupid or unintelligent or isn't a good person. It just means that there were just different things that kind of hindered their road. And that happens often within academia. Like, it's just not an easy degree to get. And so you do leave the situation with feeling defeated. So we have to remind each other, like, hey, no, it's okay to have emotions. You can't just speak it into an existence, because then you're going to end up at points of your life so unhappy with where you're at that you just start lying about where you're at. And then you're just going home and you're laying in bed and you're miserable. Like, it doesn't help to sit there and say, like, just think it away. Like, let's step back and let's work together to help get you moving forward. So if you are in that situation, I would love for you to reach out to me. I know that's kind of weird to just be like, hey, like, I really want these things to happen and they're not happening. And sometimes it's just about knowing the right people. And sometimes it's about getting up off your butt and doing something. So you got to do something with that. So, yeah, that's what I have for tonight. I hope, I just hope that you hear me and I know that I love being positive. I love thinking positive. I love working hard. And I do really, really, really stand by, if we don't plan something, it's not going to happen. So we have to do the hard work to plan, and then we have to move. We can set it on our calendar, but if we don't do the things to get there, we're never going to arrive. So I hope you liked tonight's episode. If you have questions, let me know. If you need a friend, if you need someone to help just kind of re-guide your calendar to where you're like, okay, I'm back on track, let's connect. But if you just want to think positive and have someone to be like, yes, let's think positive together, I'm here for you too. So yeah, have a great night, and I'll see you guys next week.